Reluctant Entrepreneur Tarot. I'm Diana Ideas, Master Certified Coach, and this video takes you behind the scenes of Reluctant Entrepreneur Tarot, card 19, Abundance. So in tarot, we have a number of power couples and different types of energy. So the Magician is paired with the High Priestess. So as we look at these cards, the Magician has the coloring of the Sun card, that yellow and the red. There's an abundance of plants, of growth. He has that established mastery of the elements that are presented on the table. He is a conduit pointing to the sky and pointing to the earth, so that channeling of the divine. The high priestess is more mysterious, that kind of darker, feminine, cooler. The moon is present, the water is present based on intuition. She's holding a scroll or a book, usually, however, it's closed. But these two show us the magic that's possible. For the magician, it's a different sense of clarity. For the high priestess, she taps into the intuition and doesn't necessarily explain herself. So, one of the things to think about in tarot with these power couples is they don't have to be someone who identifies as a man and someone who identifies as a woman. Think more about energy and balance. So, oftentimes, where you have one type of energy in the deck, it will be balanced either by the card before or after, or balanced at some point in the journey. So this kind of darker, more mysterious feminine is paired with the more socially acceptable and traditionally acceptable feminine, the mother. So fertility, abundance, we have the creator, the mother, who's then partnered with the emperor, who takes those creations and adds the structural elements, who builds the foundation and builds an empire from it. So we have two different power couples that kick off the fool's journey and introduce the fool into what's possible. So one of the things to think about from an entrepreneurial perspective is we have that magician, the sun rises in the east, there's growth, it's a more established path. The serial entrepreneur shows what's possible in entrepreneurship, especially to someone who's just starting out and doesn't know what's possible. The serial entrepreneur not only has done entrepreneurship, but has chosen to do it again. Followed by intuition. You see the columns here. It's a bit more mysterious. There's a more feminine presence, but at the same time encourages the entrepreneur to listen to what they're knowing without necessarily rationally knowing. The serial entrepreneur has the data of success and repeating success and what worked and what didn't. The intuition card, or in this case with the high priestess, it's the things that are known but can't really be explained. That's followed by the innovation. So the Empress is focused on creation. We have the creation of the tattoo, you have the wildflowers just growing and blooming in abundance, and also the feminine energy here creating. And then that goes to the more masculine side with the sails and the emperor. So how are you going to structure that innovation? We see the watch and the time and the money and the container holding the money. So looking at, you've taken your innovation, but how are you actually going to sell something and do something with it? So these power couples from tarot in the reluctant entrepreneur deck are more energies as opposed to a man or a woman as they're presented in the traditional deck. But thinking about just for yourself and your business, whether you tend to be more comfortable in the masculine energy or in the feminine energy, and that may change in different contexts. And know that that doesn't necessarily mean male or female, but thinking about these different energies, tarot likes balance, and it associates with cycles. So there's a way that we don't look at cycles and expect everything to be good all the time. But as we look at tarot and we look at the fool's journey or the entrepreneur's journey, we're going through these different lessons. There's lessons to be learned at each stop. So one of the power couples, not surprisingly, is the moon and the sun. So we have the more feminine with the moon, the same coloring here as the high priestess, the same columns and the water and the moon of the high priestess. The sun, we have the yellow and the red, and then you even have some of the structure that you see in the emperor card and that same kind of growth. So as you look at these cards in the traditional deck, they have that similarity. So because cycles are so prevalent and there's a relationship between the moon and the sun, I went ahead and paired these with scarcity and abundance. And this one's a bit of a challenge because scarcity can be looked at as such a dark thing and such a negative thing. And I don't want to give the moon an overly negative connotation because the moon can be deceptive, but The moon asks us to look at our intuition and what we know to be true, to pay attention to dreams, to be mindful that there's limited light and darkness. And scarcity has its business aspects, limited time, waiting list, limited edition, you know, being mindful of scarcity in your own life and how that helps you make strategic decisions. And then scarcity and abundance are, we wish they weren't paired as a part of a cycle and everything could be abundant all the time, but that's not real. That's not natural. The sun is followed by the moon and vice versa. They're in relationship with each other. They're not fighting with each other. There's a cycle to it. And then the moon cycles on her own. So scarcity and abundance are going to be part of your business cycle, whether you're a reluctant entrepreneur or not. And, to just focus on abundance without looking at scarcity, I think then we're closing our eyes and pretending like it's not going to happen, but it doesn't, we might as well prepare. So as we look deeper at the abundance card in the sun, you have an abundance here. There's an abundance of straw, which creates the hats. There's an abundance of hats in this card. I actually discovered this image when I was looking to make the balance card, because when I was in Vietnam and saw people carrying things to market wearing these hats, the balance card was a hard one to create if you watch that video. But you have an abundance. There's hats next to the girl, there's in front of them, there's that light, there's things behind them. So the idea of that divine oversight and being able to create and produce, and in some ways mass produce. Also with the youth and the girls, the idea that life is long, life is abundant, and they'll be able to continue to contribute and provide. So the quote associated with this is, "The key to abundance is meeting limited circumstances with unlimited thoughts." And I think this is really important when abundance seems elusive to us, when we're maybe coming out of or feel trapped in the scarcity, to really see how can we find abundance, even if we're not seeing it in our bank account or we're not feeling it with the time we have available or the money we have available. I think abundance is often sought after and can feel elusive, which is interesting because elusive is what we normally associate with the moon and intuition, and often, find that we're seeking that clarity of the sun. So the sun card is winning. You have victory, the crown of flowers, there's a structure, the white horse, the flag. So you see the similarities in the pigment of this card with both the magician and the emperor, but it's the bright, bold clarity, especially after the moon, where things were mysterious and not particularly defined. This also comes at the very tail end of the major arcana, so showing that you have made it through this segment of darkness and are now moving into the home stretch. So in WTF is Tarot, the sun is a welcome sight in any reading and some much needed ease after the tarot's most difficult stretch. His warmth offers us relief and clarity. So there's a way, even if you think about winter and when the sun comes out, all the animals and the humans like come out and bask in it. So there is a way that we brighten literally for abundance and with the sun. So something to think about, what is feeding us? How are we moving towards that? How are we leaning towards the light and seeking that abundance so that we have that nourishment, that clarity, that warmth to keep going? So speaking of the dark stretch, we have closure, which is the death card. This is traditionally associated with the beginning of the dark stretch because death is a challenging card. Closure is a difficult thing to face as an entrepreneur. We get little bit of respite with temperance, which in this case is the balance card. And we get some divine intervention to say like, hey, you're on the right path. You maybe have faced death, but you have some divine intervention, which is good because the devil, shown here by doubt, comes up next and looks at like, what ways are we limiting ourselves? Addiction, self-limiting beliefs, like what are the things inside of us that are not allowing us to move forward? And then wham, the tower falls and failure. So these four are actually called the big three. So not counting the balance card or the star card that precedes it. These are kind of associated with the most difficult stretch. The thing though, as you see from some of the darkness of the cards, you're also still in the dark. So self-care is the star card. So you've made it through the tower. The tower takes place at night. The devil has a darkness to it. The death card has a darkness to it. While self-care is the star, it's still night out when you see the stars, and that's followed by the moon. So while self-care and scarcity are considered out of the big three, you're still kind of in the darkness with limited light, relying on intuition. You're probably exhausted. So when the sun comes up in the cycle, it's a sign that you've made it. So this kind of later 2/3 heading into the last third of the tarot can be a very challenging stretch, but it is something that defines the fool, or in this case, defines the entrepreneur. Now, if you're able to skip over some of these cards and not go through the hard lessons of closure, doubt, and failure, more power to you. However, watch out, because a lot of these energies show up and they are part of the cycle. They're part of our learning. But at the same time, when you have arrived at the abundance and made it through the scarcity and the challenge and the doubt, the closure, the failure, then there's a lot to be celebrated. And this is the home stretch in tarot. So it's followed by perspective and then success. And then that's actually the closure of the major arcana, ending with the success card, at which point you head into the minors or you can start the cycle again. So home stretch on this one, but showing that abundance is or the sun is the card where you've made it through. So questions to consider. How are you living in abundance? What can you celebrate? So these are especially important for entrepreneurs and reluctant entrepreneurs, because it can be so easy to focus on what you don't have, what you need but don't have. And it can be challenging to celebrate, especially because success can feel so tenuous and so challenging. So being able to find abundance and find celebration is very important. Where might you be risking burn or overexposure? So it's important to not just look at cards as good or bad in tarot, because they're different energies. They all have positive and negatives, even though obviously the abundance card is going to be met probably with more welcome than the scarcity card. But looking at, do you have too much abundance? Do you have such an abundance of clients that you don't have time for yourself, that you don't have time to take breaks? So looking at that burn or overexposure to try to strategically plan so that the cycle doesn't just check itself and all of a sudden the scarcity appears, but instead you're making conscious choices, being proactive, being strategic. And then what perspective do you need to keep in mind to return to a mindset of abundance when things are feeling scarce? So I think as an entrepreneur, especially when you're in the famine cycles and you're not so close to the feast, or if you're in a feast cycle and this feels exhausting, remember that abundance and scarcity are a pair, just like the sun and moon. They have their seasons, they have their cycle, and figuring out how can you leverage both. So as far as listening, the episode associated with this is episode 11 of season 4 of Cross Street Coaching Challenges. So while we specifically reference abundance in this episode, I think what's really interesting is Drew's perspective. So Drew talks about innovation within control and constraints. And what I find fascinating about working with Drew, so he's been coaching me for years on my reluctant entrepreneur journey, and also knew me before I was an entrepreneur. So he's been such an important coach and partner to me in the process. And you'll even hear in this episode how we think very differently. So he says the market is not going to sustain everyone's dreams. And, talk about the sun and clarity and just that straight up clarity. His delivery on that and his more kind of masculine intellectual quality there, I think, is a balance and a very interesting balance to my perspective. At the same time, he's also the one who taught me just because you can't see around the corner doesn't mean it isn't there. So in the spirit of that abundance, some of that will come through in this episode, but also just wanted to give Drew a shout out because he's really been instrumental in my even doing this and sustaining doing this, because I came to him at a time, actually, it was a season of abundance that I didn't know if I could sustain it or not. And I was like, I don't think I can keep this going. I don't know how to sustain this. So he's been with me through many cycles of abundance, and I'm so thankful for his continued presence. So hope that something that he shares, or just his perspective, or just the play on the differences in our perspective may be helpful for you if you want to check out this episode. The song associated with this card is Positivity by the Black Eyed Peas. So on the most simple side, you got to keep it on the positive, the abundance, the sun, the light, the clarity. But at the same time, this song, while it's a very nice sounding song, is also a call out for what's wrong in hip hop. Nowadays it's hard to make a living, but easy to make a killing. These rap fans are taking this shit serious. They talk about the problems. Let's see what we can do to solve them. They talk about, God gave you the meaning of life and you missed it. You've been listed in the devil's books. So what's interesting is the devil card precedes this one in tarot, and then judgment comes after it. So there is, they weren't necessarily thinking about tarot and the entrepreneur fool's journey, but I see some parallels there. They talk about the kind of soul and mirage, which I think you see as, moving through death and moving through the moon. Even though we've got problems, we got to find some way to solve them. I hope you come along and follow me now and keep it on the positive. They also talk about how, connected. So what about the midget brains, unable to see reality too unreal, sealed with mind, body, and soul, connected together? We're tougher than leather. We're much more than you think we are. We're the product of our own environment. Repent with equality plus duality and take in all kind of possibilities. I sing the song from the soul. Let it rise from the tone. Let it rhythmically grow into its own life. Let it become you. Then you become it. Once you become it, everything will be infinite. So the idea of the cycle, the growth, if you think about the sun bringing life and also taking that positivity and it's infusing it with life. And then towards the end of the song, mainly we represent positivity. I sing the song from the soul, and then it talks about rise from the tone, rhythmically grow into its own life, become you and become it. So the connectivity and the light is not just, oh, let's only look at the positive and let's only look at the abundance. They're looking at the positive and encouraging people to be positive, but also calling out what's wrong. And that's what the sun does. It brings that clarity and that light, especially after darkness, but it's also looking at what are the hard truths that we've learned and how do we need to continue to lead and move forward from those. So if you'd like to learn more, check out Reluctant Entrepreneur Tarot on Instagram. Tiffany makes weekly videos. You can also check out the website where you can read this description, the questions to consider, listen to the podcast, watch this video, and find different ways to work with us. So wherever you are with the power couples of tarot or in the cycle of scarcity and abundance, wishing you well in your entrepreneurial journey.